They called Julian Sterling the Ice King of New York, a billionaire who bought companies just to tear them apart. She was just Ethan, the invisible girl refilling champagne flutes at his engagement party. But when Julian drunkenly pointed to the orchestra's sheet music and sneered, "I'll give a ring to any waitress who can hit that high F," he thought he was making a joke. He didn't know he was waking a ghost. He didn't know that the girl in the cheap uniform was the vanished prodigy the world had been hunting for. What happened next didn't just silence the room. It threatened to burn his empire to the ground. This is the story of the aria, the bet, and the secret. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel smelled of lilies, old money, and desperation. Ethan Miller adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform, wincing as the strap of her apron dug into her shoulder. She had been on her feet for 9 hours. Her lower back throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache that seemed to sync with the string quartet playing softly in the corner. "Champagne, sir?" she murmured, extending a silver tray toward a cluster of men in tuxedos. They didn't look at her. They simply took the flutes, their conversations about mergers and acquisitions flowing over her head like water over a stone. That was the rule of the service industry. Be efficient, be polite, be invisible. Ethan was good at being invisible. In fact, she had spent the last 5 years perfecting the art of disappearing. "Julian, please, you're making a scene." A shrill voice cut through the hum of the crowd. Ethan froze. She knew that voice. It belonged to Beatrice Vanderwall, a socialite whose father owned half of the shipping docks in Jersey. But it was the man she was speaking to who commanded the room's gravity. Julian Sterling. He was leaning against the Steinway grand piano, a half-empty tumbler of scotch in his hand. He was devastatingly handsome in that sharp, predatory way that made you check your pockets to make sure you still had your wallet. His tie was undone, his dark hair slightly mussed. He looked bored, lethally bored. "I'm not making a scene, Beatrice," Julian said, his voice a deep, smooth baritone that carried effortlessly across the room. "I'm merely pointing out that this music is a funeral dirge. If I'm going to donate $5 million to the Arts Conservatory tonight, I expect actual art." He gestured vaguely at the terrified pianist, a young man named Arthur, who looked ready to faint. "It's Mozart, Julian," Beatrice hissed, gripping his arm. "It's cultured." "It's lifeless," Julian countered, pulling his arm away. He slammed his glass down on the piano lid, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The room went silent. The string quartet stopped playing. Ethan tried to back away, to melt into the shadows near the kitchen doors, but the crowd had shifted, boxing her in. She was stuck 3 feet away from the Billionaire. Julian picked up a piece of sheet music from the piano stand. He squinted at it. Mozart, Die Zauberflöte, the Queen of the Night aria. He laughed, a cold, sharp sound, the most difficult piece in the soprano repertoire. "And you have a student playing it on a violin? Boring." He turned to the crowd, his eyes scanning the room with a manic glint. He was drunk, Ethan realized. Not stumbling drunk, but the kind of drunk that made powerful men dangerous. "Tell you what," Julian announced, raising his voice. "I'm bored. I want to be entertained. I have a Harry Winston diamond in my pocket, intended for... Well, let's say the recipient is no longer relevant." Beatrice gasped, her face turning crimson. Everyone knew that ring was meant for her, pending the announcement tonight. Julian held up a ring. It caught the chandelier light, a flawless, teardrop diamond that probably cost more than the entire neighborhood Ethan grew up in. "I'll marry the woman who can sing this right now," Julian sneered, waving the sheet music. "Hell, I'll give this ring to the help if they can hit the F6. He turned and locked eyes with Ethan. It was an accident. He was just looking for a prop, something to illustrate how low he was willing to stoop to insult Beatrice. He saw the tray in Ethan's hand, the fraying hem of her skirt, the tired circles under her eyes. "You," Julian said, pointing a finger at her. "Waitress. What's your name?" "Ethan, sir," she whispered, gripping her tray so hard her knuckles turned white. "Ethan," he mocked. "Do you know Mozart, Ethan? Or is your musical taste limited to the rattle of silverware?" The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter. Beatrice smirked, sensing the target had shifted away from her. "Oh, leave the poor girl alone, Julian. She probably can't even read the menu, let alone music." That stung. It was a small, petty barb, but it pierced through the wall Ethan had built around herself. "Can't read." Ethan looked at the sheet music in Julian's hand. The black notes danced on the page. "Der Hölle Rache kocht in meinem Herzen. Hell's vengeance boils in my heart." She knew every note. She knew the intake of breath required before the first staccato run. She knew the exact placement of the tongue to hit the high F without screeching. She shouldn't do this. She was Ethan Miller, a nobody from Queens. If she did this, Ethan Miller would cease to exist. But Julian was laughing. Beatrice was laughing. The pianist, Arthur, was looking at her with pity. "Come on, Ethan," Julian goaded, stepping closer. He smelled of expensive scotch and sandalwood. "Give us a squeak. I'll give you 10 grand just to try." He shoved the sheet music into her hands. Ethan looked down at the paper. Then she looked up at Julian. His eyes were blue, icy and full of a profound, arrogant emptiness. He expected her to crumble. He expected her to cry and run to the kitchen so he could laugh about it with his board members on Monday. Something inside Ethan snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, just the quiet click of a lock turning. She set her tray down on the piano bench. The clatter of the empty glasses rang out. "I don't need the sheet music," she said. Her voice was soft, speaking, but it possessed a timbre that made the hair on Julian's arms stand up. "Excuse me." Julian blinked. "I said," Ethan repeated, lifting her chin. "I don't need the music." She turned to the terrified pianist. "B flat major, if you please, and don't drag the tempo. It's an aria of rage, not a lullaby." The pianist looked at Julian. Julian gave a confused, dismissive wave of his hand. "Play it." The piano began the frantic, stormy introduction. Ethan closed her eyes. She wasn't in the ballroom anymore. She was back in Vienna, in the practice room with her mother, the metronome ticking like a time bomb. She was Serafina again. She opened her mouth. The first note wasn't just a sound, it was a physical force. It slammed into the back of the room, clear, resonant, and terrifyingly perfect. "Der Hölle Rache kocht in meinem Herzen." The glass in Julian's hand slipped. He didn't drop it. His fingers simply forgot how to hold it. He caught it against his chest, staining his white shirt. But he didn't notice. Ethan didn't sing like a waitress. She didn't sing like a choir girl. She sang with the technical precision of a master and the raw, bleeding emotion of a woman who had lost everything. The German diction was flawless. The coloratura runs were machine gun rapid, every note distinct, popping like pearls on a string. Then came the moment. The high F6. The room collectively held its breath. This was the note that broke careers. Ethan didn't reach for it. She didn't strain. She simply became the note. It pierced the air, bell-like, shimmering, a sound so pure it felt like it could cut skin. She held it. She sustained it. She let it vibrate against the crystal chandeliers. She finished the phrase, the final notes cascading down like falling stars, ending on the sharp, defiant resolve. The silence that followed was heavier than the singing. No one moved. No one breathed. The pianist's hands hovered over the keys, shaking. Ethan opened her eyes. The adrenaline crashed out of her, leaving her trembling. She saw the faces, mouths agape, eyes wide. She saw Beatrice, pale as a sheet, and she saw Julian. The arrogance was gone. The boredom was gone. He was staring at her as if she were an alien species that had just crash-landed in his living room. His lips were parted, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her want to run. "Who are you?" he whispered. The microphone caught it. Ethan realized what she had done. The silence wasn't admiration, it was exposure. She had just blown her cover in front of the richest people in New York in the era of smartphones. Ethan stammered. She looked at the ring in his hand, then at the door. "I have to go." She grabbed her tray and bolted. "Wait!" Julian shouted, snapping out of his trance. "Ethan! Wait!" But she was already through the kitchen doors, leaving the Ice King of Wall Street, holding a diamond ring and looking, for the first time in his life, completely defeated. By the time Ethan made it to her tiny studio apartment in the Bronx, her phone was already buzzing. She didn't pick it up. She threw her apron into the corner and sat on the edge of her bed, burying her face in her hands. "Stupid," she muttered. "Stupid, stupid Serafina." She hadn't used her real name in 5 years. Not since the scandal. Not since her mother, the legendary diva Maria Valente, had died under a cloud of shame, and the press had accused her teenage daughter, Serafina, of leaking the private recordings that ruined the family legacy. She had run away. She had dyed her hair brown, stopped wearing makeup, and learned to talk with a flat American accent. She became Ethan Miller, and now Ethan Miller was trending on Twitter. She opened her laptop with trembling fingers. The video was everywhere. Waitress outsings the Met. Who is the mystery soprano? Julian Sterling rejected by singing Waitress. The video had 4 million views in 3 hours. It showed everything: the humiliation, Julian's sneer, and then the voice. There was a loud banging on her door. Ethan jumped. "Go away!" she yelled, thinking it was her landlord looking for the rent she was 2 days late on. "Miss Miller." A man's voice, deep, authoritative. Not the landlord. "My name is Marcus Reed. I'm the head of security for Sterling Hearth Enterprises." Mr. Sterling would like a word. Ethan's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm not opening the door." "He's in the car, Miss Miller. He says he still has the ring." Ethan walked to the window and peered through the blinds. A sleek black Maybach was parked illegally in front of a crumbling brick building. A crowd was already starting to form, neighbors with phones out. She had no choice. If she stayed, the press would find her address by morning. Ethan pulled on a grey hoodie, opened the door, and walked past the mountain of a man named Marcus. She marched straight to the car and yanked the back door open. Julian was sitting there, illuminated by the glow of a tablet. He looked different than he had at the party, sober, sharper. "Get in," he said. He didn't look up. "I'm not marrying you," Ethan said, standing on the sidewalk. "It was a joke, I get it." "Get in." Julian looked up. His eyes were tired. "Please, the paparazzi are 3 minutes away." Ethan slid into the leather seat. The door closed, sealing out the noise of the Bronx. The car smelled of leather and silence. "You're Serafina Valente," Julian said. It wasn't a question. Ethan went cold. "I don't know who that is." Julian turned the tablet toward her. It showed a side-by-side comparison. One image was Ethan from tonight, grainy and dark. The other was a high-resolution photo of a 17-year-old girl on the stage of La Scala, holding a bouquet of roses. The resemblance was undeniable, despite the hair color. "My PR team is very thorough," Julian said. Daughter of Maria Valenti, opera prodigy, vanished 5 years ago after—" He paused, scrolling. "After an embezzlement and blackmail scandal involving your mother's manager." "I didn't do it," Ethan said automatically. The old defense rose up, bitter and useless. "I don't care if you did," Julian said. He locked the tablet and set it aside. "I don't care about opera, Ethan, or Serafina. I care about business." "Then let me out." "I can't," Julian said. "Because of that video, Sterling Hearth stock is up 4% in after-hours trading. The public loves a Cinderella story. They think I found you. They think I'm a romantic genius instead of a corporate shark." He sighed and rubbed his temples. "My board of directors has been trying to oust me. They say I'm too volatile, too unlikable. They want a family man. Someone stable." He looked at her. "You are my stability." Ethan laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "You want to hire me to be your fake fiancé?" "No," Julian corrected. "I want to hire you to be my wife. Legally. For 1 year." "You're insane!" "I'm desperate," Julian snapped. The mask slipped for a second, revealing a flash of genuine panic. "If I lose the CEO chair next month, my father's company gets chopped up and sold for parts. I need a narrative change. You need, well, looking at your shoes, you need everything." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something and tore it out. $2 million, Julian said, holding it out. "And I pay off your mother's estate debts. I know the IRS is still chasing you for her back taxes. That's why you're hiding, isn't it?" Ethan stared at the check. It was more money than she could save in 10 lifetimes as a waitress. It was freedom. It was a way to finally hire a lawyer to clear her name. "What are the terms?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You move into the penthouse. We attend galas. You play the role of the woman who melted the Ice King's heart. We get married in a month. We divorce in a year. You get the money. I keep my company." "And the singing?" Ethan asked. "Do I have to sing?" Julian looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No. In fact, I'd prefer you didn't. That voice, it attracts too much attention." There was something in his tone, a shadow. He wasn't just annoyed by the music, he was disturbed by it. "Why?" Ethan asked. "Why did you react like that at the party, before I even sang the high note? You looked scared." Julian looked away, out the tinted window at the passing city lights. "My mother was a singer," he said quietly. "She died when I was 7. That aria, it was the last thing she practiced." The car went silent. Ethan looked at the check, then at the man who was offering to buy her life. He was broken, arrogant, and dangerous, but he was also her only way out. "1 year," Ethan said. "1 year," Julian agreed. He held out his hand. Ethan took it. His skin was cool, his grip firm. "Drive, Marcus," Julian said to the front. As the car sped toward Manhattan, Ethan realized 2 things. First, she was no longer invisible. Second, Julian Sterling was lying. He didn't just want a fake wife for the board members. He wanted her for something else. She had seen the way he looked at her when she hit the F6. It wasn't love. It was recognition. And she had a terrible feeling that the scandal she had run from 5 years ago was somehow connected to the man sitting next to her. The Sterling penthouse on 5th Avenue was larger than the entire hotel Ethan used to work in. It was a masterpiece of glass, steel, and cold minimalist art. It had no soul. 3 days had passed since the viral video. Ethan, now introduced to the world as Ethan Miller, the hidden gem, had been scrubbed, polished, and dressed by a team of stylists who poked and prodded her as if she were a prize horse. She stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom. She wore a silk emerald gown that cost $12,000. Her hair, once pulled back in a messy bun, was now a glossy cascade of chestnut waves. "You look acceptable," a voice said from the doorway. Ethan turned. It was Sylvia Roach, Julian's personal manager, and the woman currently holding Ethan's life in a binder. Sylvia was 50, razor-thin, and had a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The gala tonight is crucial," Sylvia said, walking in and adjusting a strap on Ethan's dress without asking. "The board of directors will be there, specifically Elias Vane." "The man trying to fire Julian?" Ethan asked. "The man trying to destroy Julian," Sylvia corrected. "Vane doesn't believe this romance. He thinks it's a stunt. Tonight you have to convince him that you are madly in love with Julian Sterling." "That might be hard," Ethan muttered, "considering I haven't seen Julian in 2 days." It was true. Since the car ride, Julian had vanished into his office. He left before she woke up and returned after she was asleep. They were roommates who shared nothing but a legal contract. "He's busy saving the company," Sylvia snapped. "Now remember the backstory. You met 6 months ago at a library. You bonded over literature. You kept your job as a waitress to stay grounded. It's charming. It's relatable. Stick to the script." "And if they ask about my singing?" "You're shy," Sylvia said firmly. "You only sing for Julian. That makes it intimate, exclusive." Ethan felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She wasn't an actress. She was a singer. There was a difference. Singers told the truth through music. Actors lied with words. "Let's go," Sylvia said. "The wolf pack is waiting." The charity gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Dender was bathed in blue light. The room was filled with the same people Ethan had served 3 nights ago, but now they didn't look through her. They stared at her. Flashes blinded her as she stepped out of the limousine. Julian was waiting for her at the top of the stairs. He looked impeccable in a tuxedo, but Ethan noticed the tension in his jaw. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. "Smile," he murmured as she reached him. He took her hand. His palm was warm this time. "You look different." "I look expensive," Ethan whispered back, forcing a smile for the cameras. "That too," Julian said. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender, so practiced, that the crowd audibly swooned. "Just stay close to me. Don't talk to Elias Vane." "Why?" "Because he's a shark, and you're bleeding," Julian said grimly. They entered the hall. The night was a blur of handshakes and fake laughter. Ethan played her part. She gazed adoringly at Julian. She laughed at his dry jokes. She pretended not to notice the way people whispered, "Waitress," behind their hands. Then, inevitably, Elias Vane appeared. He was a short, stout man with a face like a bulldog and eyes that missed nothing. He blocked their path to the bar. "Julian," Elias boomed, "and the Cinderella of the hour." "Elias," Julian nodded, his grip tightening on Ethan's waist. "Ms. Miller," Elias said, turning his gaze to her. "Or is it Valenti? I have a good ear for faces, my dear, and an even better memory for scandals." Ethan's blood ran cold. Julian stiffened. "Her name is Ethan Miller," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. "And we are enjoying our evening, Elias. Don't ruin it." Of course," Elias chuckled. He took a sip of his martini. "It's just fascinating. A waitress with the voice of a diva. And Julian Sterling, a man who famously hates opera, suddenly marrying one. It almost feels orchestrated." "Careful, Elias," Julian warned. "I'm just saying," Elias continued, stepping closer to Ethan. "If you really are Serafina Valenti, you should be careful. The people who destroyed your mother, They're still around. Some of them are closer than you think." He glanced meaningfully at Julian. Ethan pulled back. She looked at Julian. Julian didn't look at her. He was staring Elias down with a murderous intensity. "Excuse us," Julian said. He grabbed Ethan's arm and practically dragged her onto the balcony. The night air was cool. Below them, Central Park was a dark void. "What did he mean?" Ethan demanded, pulling her arm free. "He knows who I am." "He suspects," Julian said, pacing. "He doesn't have proof. If he had proof, it would be on the front page of the Times." "He said the people who destroyed my mother are close," Ethan said, her voice shaking. "Julian, look at me. Did your company have anything to do with Valenti Records?" Julian stopped pacing. He turned to her. For a moment, he looked like he was going to lie. Then he slumped against the stone railing. "My father," Julian admitted. "Arthur Sterling. He was on the board of the record label that represented your mother. When the embezzlement scandal broke, my father bought the rights to her entire catalogue for pennies on the dollar." Ethan felt the air leave her lungs. Your family profited from my mother's suicide?" "I didn't know," Julian said quickly. "Not until 2 days ago. I looked into the files after I found out who you were. My father is ruthless, Ethan. You know that." "And you're just like him," Ethan whispered. Tears pricked her eyes. "You're using me to save the company that stole my mother's legacy." "I'm trying to take the company from him." Julian grabbed her shoulders. "Why do you think I'm fighting Vane? Why do you think I need this merger? If I get full control, I can fix it. I can give you the rights back. I can clear her name. But I can only do that if I win." Ethan stared at him. She wanted to slap him. She wanted to scream. But looking into his eyes, she saw something else. Desperation. And guilt. "You're lying," she said softly. "There's more. Why do you hate the music, Julian? Why did you freeze when I sang?" Julian looked away. "Because," he whispered, "I was there." "Where?" "The night she died. My father took me to the studio. Your mother was there. They were arguing. She was crying. She sang that aria to try and calm herself down. Then she went into the office with my father, and I never saw her again." Ethan covered her mouth. "You met her?" "I was 7. I sat in the hallway and listened to her sing Queen of the Night. It was the most beautiful, terrifying thing I'd ever heard. When you sang it the other night, it was like a ghost walked through me." He stepped closer, his hand sliding down her arms to hold her hands. "I'm not the enemy, Ethan. I'm a victim of Arthur Sterling just like you. Help me take him down. Help me win this board vote, and I swear to you, I will give you everything back." Ethan looked at the man who was her husband on paper. She saw the boy who had sat in a hallway, listening to her mother cry. She made a choice. It was dangerous, it was reckless, but it was the only way to get the truth. "Okay," Ethan said. "We bury Elias Vane. We take the company. But after that, if you lie to me again, Julian, I won't just divorce you. I will sing to the press, and I will sing the truth." Julian nodded. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. It wasn't for the cameras. There was no one on the balcony. "Deal," he said. Suddenly, the balcony doors burst open. It was Sylvia. She looked pale. "Mr. Sterling," she gasped. "You need to come inside. Now." "What is it?" Julian asked, annoyed. "It's the pianist," Sylvia said. "The kid from the hotel, Arthur. He just uploaded a video." "So?" "He has a recording of the rehearsal," Sylvia said, her voice trembling. "He says Ethan didn't just sing the aria. He says she corrected his playing using technical terms only a conservatory prodigy would know. And," she held up her phone, "Elias Vane just retweeted it with the caption, Welcome back from the dead, Serafina. Julian and Ethan looked at each other. The secret was out. The game had changed. Well, Ethan said, hiking up her emerald dress, I guess I don't have to pretend to be shy anymore. Julian straightened his tie. A dark, dangerous smile spread across his face. The smile of the Wolf of Wall Street. No, Julian said. Now, we go to war. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had turned into a coliseum, and Ethan was the Christian facing the lions. Elias Vane stood near the Temple of Denda, a glass of scotch raised in a mock toast. The crowd had parted, creating a wide circle around Julian and Ethan. The murmurs were becoming shouts as reporters, sensing blood in the water, breached the velvet ropes. "Is it true?" a reporter from the Post shouted, thrusting a recorder forward. "Are you Serafina Valenti, the fugitive?" Julian stepped in front of her, his broad shoulders creating a shield. "Back off," he snarled. "We are leaving." "Running away again, Serafina." Elias Vane's voice cut through the noise. He stepped forward, his bulldog face flushed with triumph. "You can't run this time. The shareholders are watching. If Julian Sterling is harboring a known embezzler and fraudster, he isn't just unfit to be CAO. He's a criminal accessory." Julian lunged, but Ethan grabbed his arm. Her grip was iron. She looked at Julian. His eyes were wild with panic. Not for himself, she realized, but for her. He was ready to punch a board member on national television to get her out of there. He really is protecting me, she thought. Ethan let go of Julian's arm and stepped around him. She smoothed the silk of her emerald gown. She lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of the diva, training her mother had drilled into her since birth. "I am not running," Ethan said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it projected perfectly to the back of the hall. The room went silent. She turned to Elias Vane. "And I am not a fraud, Mr. Vane. I am Serafina Valenti. And yes, I disappeared 5 years ago." She paused, letting the cameras zoom in. "But I didn't disappear because I was guilty," she lied. Or rather, she spun the truth. "I disappeared because I discovered that the men who destroyed my mother were coming for me next. I worked in shadows. I scrubbed floors. I waited." She looked at Julian, her eyes softening. "Until Julian found me. He didn't hire a waitress, Elias. He found a woman seeking justice. He investigated the truth, and he protected me when no one else would. It was a brilliant fabrication. It turned Julian from a dupe into a hero, and Ethan from a fugitive into a survivor." Elias Vane's smile faltered. "A pretty story. But where is the proof? You're still a wanted woman, Ms. Valenti." "The proof," Ethan said, bluffing with everything she had, "is coming. But tonight, I am done hiding." She turned to the small chamber orchestra that had been hired for background music. She nodded to the cellist. "You know Puccini?" she asked. The musician nodded, wide-eyed. "Play Visi d'arte," she commanded. "I lived for art, I lived for love." It was a strategic choice. It was the aria of Tosca, a woman pleading with God while being blackmailed by a corrupt police chief. It was a mirror to her situation. The music began. Ethan sang. If Queen of the Night had been a weapon, Visi d'arte was a prayer. Her voice floated through the museum, rich, velvet, and heartbreaking. She poured 5 years of scrubbing tables, 5 years of fear and 5 years of grief into the melody. She walked toward the cameras as she sang. She made eye contact with the reporters. She let them see the tears in her eyes. She wasn't singing to the crowd. She was singing to the court of public opinion. When she finished, there was no applause, just the sound of people weeping. Julian stared at her, mesmerized. He looked like a man who had just seen the face of God. Ethan walked back to him, took his hand and whispered, "Now we run." They walked out through the stunned crowd. Even Elias Vane couldn't move. Ethan had turned the scandal into a tragedy, and herself into the martyr. But as soon as they got into the limousine and the doors slammed shut, Ethan collapsed against the seat, hyperventilating. That was... Julian exhaled, tugging his tie loose. That was ruthless and brilliant. "It bought us minutes, not safety," Ethan said, still shaking. "Vane will keep digging. We need proof. The files your father buried." Julian's jaw tightened. "I know where they are, but it means stepping straight into his territory." "Where?" "My father's house. He's invited us to dinner tomorrow. Says he wants to meet the bride." Translation: negotiate our surrender. The Sterling estate rose from the Hamptons like a bunker, stone, wind, and silence. Arthur Sterling presided from a wheelchair at the head of a table long enough to intimidate an army. His eyes were Julian's blue, stripped of warmth. "You look like your mother," Arthur rasped to Ethan. "I want to know why you ruined her," she said. Julian squeezed her hand. "We want the Valenti files." Arthur smiled. "I didn't hide the truth. I manufactured it. Your mother tried to leave. Assets don't get to walk away." Ethan went cold. "You killed her," she whispered. "She was weak," Arthur snapped, turning on Julian. "Just like you." Julian slammed the table. "I built the empire you're poisoning." "You built it," Arthur sneered. "And now I'm going to take it back. Unless..." "Unless what?" Ethan asked. "Unless you leave him," Arthur said to Ethan. "Break the engagement. Admit it was a sham. Testify that Julian forced you into it. If you do that, I will give you the original ledgers. You can clear your name. You can have your life back. But Julian goes to prison for fraud. And if I refuse? Then I release the rest of the evidence I fabricated. You'll go to prison, Serafina, and Julian will be destitute." Arthur threw a file folder onto the table. "Think about it. You have until the board vote on Friday." Julian stood up. "We're leaving." He wheeled Ethan out of the room. They drove back to the city in silence, the weight of the ultimatum crushing the air between them. Back at the penthouse, the tension broke. Julian paced the living room, pouring himself a drink. "He has us. He has checkmate." "No, he doesn't," Ethan said. She walked over to him and took the glass from his hand. "We fight." "How?" Julian looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "He's right. I am soft. I saw you sing tonight, and all I could think about was running away with you. I don't care about the company anymore, Ethan. I care about you not going to jail." "I'm not going to jail," Ethan said fiercely. "And you're not soft, you're human." She reached up and cupped his face. The connection that had sparked on the balcony, that had burned during the aria, finally ignited. Julian kissed her. It wasn't a staged kiss for the cameras. It was desperate, hungry, and real. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was oxygen. They moved to the bedroom. For the first time, the contract didn't exist. The lie didn't exist. There was only Julian and Serafina. Later that night, while Julian slept, Ethan got up for water. She saw a light blinking on Julian's desk. His laptop was open. She didn't mean to snoop, but the file name on the screen caught her eye. Project Valenti. Archive. Her heart skipped a beat. She touched the trackpad. The folder opened. It contained scans of documents, bank transfers, and there at the bottom of a transfer authorization, moving $2 million from Valenti Records to a shell account, was a signature. It wasn't Arthur Sterling's signature. It was Julian Sterling's, dated 5 years ago. Ethan froze. The room spun. Julian would have been 23, old enough to know. Arthur hadn't acted alone. Julian had signed the transfer. Julian had helped steal her mother's money. Ethan looked at the sleeping man in the bed. The man she had just given her body and heart to. "You liar," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You were part of it." She didn't wake him. She packed her bag. She took a photo of the screen with her phone. And then she vanished into the New York night. The next morning, Julian woke up reaching for Ethan. He found only cold sheets and a note on the pillow. I saw the signature. "Don't come looking for me." Julian read it 3 times. The blood drained from his face. "No," he groaned. "No, no, no." He ran to his computer. He saw the open file. "You idiot!" he shouted at the empty room. "You didn't read the addendum." He grabbed his phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. He called Marcus, his security head. "Find her! Turn this city upside down." But it was too late. By noon, the news broke. Singing Waitress dumps Billionaire. Ethan had gone to the press. But she hadn't exposed the embezzlement. She had simply stated that the engagement was off and that she could not marry a man she didn't trust. Sterling Hearth stock plummeted 15% in an hour. Julian sat in his office, watching his empire burn. Elias Vane walked in, smiling like a shark who had smelled chum. "It's over, Julian," Vane said. "The board has called an emergency vote for tomorrow morning. You're out. I'm in." "Get out of my office," Julian said, his voice dead. "Gladly. I have a meeting with the new CEO of Valenti Music. We're planning a reissue of Maria's albums. Shame her daughter won't see a dime." Julian sat alone in the darkening office. He had lost the company. He had lost Ethan. He opened the safe behind his desk. He pulled out a yellowed envelope. It wasn't the digital file Ethan had seen. It was the original paper trail. He had spent 5 years trying to decode his father's accounts to prove his own innocence. The signature Ethan saw was his, forged by Arthur using a power of attorney Julian had unknowingly signed when he was in college. Julian had only found out about it 6 months ago. That was why he was so desperate to fight his father. He was trying to clear his own name, too. But Ethan didn't know that. She thought he was the villain. "Fine," Julian whispered. "If I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose loud." Meanwhile, Ethan was staying in a cheap motel in Queens. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. She felt hollowed out. She should hate him. She did hate him. But her phone buzzed. It was a link sent by an unknown number. She clicked it. It was a video file. The video showed a young Julian, maybe 22, arguing with his father in an office. The date stamp was 5 years ago, 2 days before her mother died. In the video, Julian, "I won't sign off on these transfers, Dad. It's stealing. Maria trusts us." Arthur, "You don't have to sign, boy. I have your power of attorney. I own you." Julian, "I'll go to the police." Arthur, "Go ahead, and I'll tell them you orchestrated it. Who will they believe? The billionaire or the rebellious son? And if you speak, I'll destroy that girl. Serafina. I'll ruin her career before it starts." Julian goes pale. He backs down. The video ended. Ethan dropped the phone. He didn't steal the money. He was blackmailed into silence to protect her. For 5 years, he had lived with the guilt, letting the world think he was the ice-cold son of Arthur Sterling, all to keep Arthur from coming after Serafina. And when he met her at the party, when he offered the contract, he wasn't using her. He was trying to give her the money back the only way he could without alerting his father. "Oh my God," Ethan sobbed. "I left him alone." The board vote was in 1 hour. Ethan grabbed her coat. She didn't have a car. She didn't have money for a cab. She ran to the subway. The boardroom of Sterling Hearth Enterprises was a glass cage, suspended 40 floors above the concrete grid of Manhattan. It was a cold, sterile aquarium where net worths were measured and careers were quietly executed. Today, the execution was scheduled for noon. 20 board members sat around the 50-foot mahogany table. They were men and women of stone, impassive, wealthy, and currently very impatient. At the head of the table stood Elias Vane. He didn't look like a man conducting a meeting. He looked like a predator hovering over a carcass. His suit was Italian silk, his watch cost more than a house, and his smile was a sliver of white shark teeth. "The time for debate is over," Elias announced, his voice smooth and oily. "The stock is in freefall. The public trust is broken. We have a CEO who is mentally unstable, entangled with a fugitive, and incapable of leading this conglomerate." He turned his gaze to the far end of the table. Julian Sterling sat alone. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His tie was loose, his eyes were shadowed, and his hands were resting on a thick, yellow manila envelope. He felt the weight of the room crushing him. He had lost Ethan. That was the only thought echoing in his mind. The company didn't matter anymore. The legacy didn't matter. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence," Elias continued, raising a hand. "All in favor of removing Julian Sterling as CEO and appointing myself as interim chairman?" The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Slowly, hands began to rise. 1, 2, 5, 7. Julian watched the hands go up. It was a slow-motion car crash. He fingered the edge of the envelope. It contained the proof of his innocence and his father's guilt, but he felt too tired to open it. What was the point of winning the war if he had already lost the peace? Ethan hated him. She believed he was a thief. "Wait." Julian's voice was a rasp, but it cut through the room. He stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Before you cast the final vote," Julian said, his eyes scanning the faces of the people he had worked with for a decade, "I am resigning." A collective gasp went through the room. Elias Vane's smile widened into a grin of pure triumph. "A wise choice, Julian," Elias gloated. "Perhaps we can let you keep a ceremonial title. Consultant to the custodial staff, perhaps?" "I am resigning," Julian repeated, ignoring the jab. "But I am not leaving alone." He picked up the yellow envelope. "I am taking the rot with me." Elias laughed. "Oh, please. Not the secret files bluff again. You have nothing, Julian. You are a lonely man with a fake wife and a ruined reputation." "He's not lonely." The voice didn't come from the table. It came from the double doors at the entrance of the boardroom. Everyone turned. The heavy oak doors, usually locked and guarded, swung open with a violent thud. Standing there, flanked by 2 confused security guards who looked like they had been shoved aside, was Ethan. She wasn't wearing the emerald gown from the gala. She wasn't wearing the designer clothes Julian had bought her. She was wearing her old uniform, the black skirt with the fraying hem and the stiff white shirt with the logo of the Pierre Hotel. Her hair was windblown, her cheeks were flushed, and she was breathing hard, as if she had run all the way from Queens. But she didn't look like a waitress. She looked like an avenging angel. "Ethan?" Julian whispered. The air left his lungs. He gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling over. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, her voice ringing with a clarity that made the acoustic glass vibrate. She stepped into the room. "Security!" Elias Vane shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. "Remove this woman. She is trespassing." The guard stepped forward, reaching for her arms. "Don't you touch her!" Julian roared. It was a command so primal, so full of dangerous authority, that the guards froze in their tracks. Julian stepped away from the table, moving toward her. "You came back," he said, stopping a few feet away from her. "Why? You saw the signature." "I saw the video," Ethan said, tears welling in her eyes but not falling. "Your mother's old assistant. She kept a copy. I saw you fight for me, Julian. I saw you sacrifice your freedom for 5 years to keep your father from hunting me down." She looked at the board members, who were watching the exchange with open mouths. "You think he's the villain?" Ethan asked the room. "You think Julian Sterling is the problem? He is the only honest thing in this entire building." She turned her gaze to Elias Vane. "And you are the reason my mother is dead." Elias sneered, though he took a nervous step back. "This is absurd. She is hysterical. Get her out." "I am not hysterical," Ethan said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "I am Serafina Valenti, and I have something to say to you, Mr. Vane. But I think I'll say it in a language you understand. The language of drama." She looked at Julian. "Give them the papers." "Ethan, you don't have to." "Give them the papers, Julian, and I will give them the truth." Julian ripped open the yellow envelope and slid the contents down the length of the mahogany table. Bank transfers, laundering schemes, emails between Arthur Sterling and Elias Vane detailing the systematic theft of the Valenti fortune. As the board members reached for the documents, Ethan closed her eyes. She clasped her hands in front of her waitress apron. She took a breath. And then she unleashed the weapon she had been hiding for 5 years. She didn't sing a ballad. She didn't sing a love song. She sang the piece that had started it all. Mozart, Der Hölle-Rache, the queen of the night's aria of vengeance. But this time it was different. At the party, she had sung it with technical perfection. Now she sang it with fury. Der Hölle-Rache kocht in meinem Herzen. Hell's vengeance boils in my heart. The sound was a physical force. It slammed into the glass walls. It pierced the air conditioning's hum. It was a voice of such impossible power and agility that the board members stopped reading. They stared at her, paralyzed. Ethan marched toward Elias Vane as she sang. Her staccato notes were like bullets, rapid-fire and precise. She hit the high F6, not as a show-off note, but as a scream of judgment. It was a sound that demanded reckoning. Elias Vane, the bulldog who had barked orders for decades, crumbled. He slumped into his chair, sweat pouring down his face. The sheer acoustic pressure, combined with the terrifying intensity of her glare, broke him. He looked small. He looked guilty. Julian watched her, mesmerized. He had never seen anything so beautiful or so terrifying. She wasn't saving him with a plea. She was saving him with a war cry. Ethan held the final resolve, the note shimmering in the air like a blade, before cutting it off with a sharp, deadly silence. The room was so quiet you could hear the traffic 40 floors down. Mrs. Higgins, the chairwoman of the board, adjusted her spectacles. Her hands were shaking as she held the ledger Julian had slid to her. "Mr. Vane," she said, her voice icy. "This signature authorizes a transfer of $4 million to a Cayman account in your name, on the same day Maria Valenti died." Elias tried to speak. It's a fabrication. She's singing to distract you. It's a trick." "The digital metadata is in the appendix," Julian said calmly, stepping up beside Ethan. He took her hand. It was cold, but her grip was strong. "Along with the recording of you threatening my father to keep your share of the cut." Mrs. Higgins stood up. She looked at Elias with pure disgust. "Security," she said. The guards, who had been unsure of what to do, now had clear orders. They moved past Ethan and grabbed Elias Vane by the arms. "You can't do this," Elias shrieked as they hauled him up. "I built this board. I am this company." "You are fired," Mrs. Higgins said. "And I imagine the district attorney will be very interested in your explanation of these transfers." As Elias was dragged out, screaming obscenities, the tension in the room broke. The board members looked at one another, then at the couple standing at the end of the table, Julian Sterling, the billionaire in the unbuttoned collar, and Ethan Miller, the waitress in the cheap uniform. "Mr. Sterling," Mrs. Higgins said, sitting back down, "it appears the motion of no confidence is withdrawn, assuming you still want the job." Julian looked at the boardroom. He looked at the city below. Then he looked at Ethan. He saw the fire in her eyes, the way her chest heaved from the exertion of the aria. "I'll keep the job," Julian said, "on one condition." "Name it," Mrs. Higgins said. "This company sets up a foundation, the Valenti Foundation, dedicated to supporting young artists and recovering stolen royalties. And we start by returning every cent my family stole from Serafina Valenti, with interest." "Agreed," Mrs. Higgins said immediately. Julian nodded. Meeting adjourned. He didn't wait for them to leave. He turned to Ethan. The adrenaline was fading, and she was starting to tremble. "You wore the uniform," he said softly, brushing a stray hair from her face. "I wanted to remind you," she whispered, "that I'm not the diamond. I'm the girl who served the champagne. That's who I am, Julian. I'm not a socialite. I'm just Ethan." "Ethan is the one I want," Julian said. "Serafina scares the hell out of me." Ethan laughed, a wet, tearful sound. "Good. You need to be kept on your toes." Julian reached into his pocket. He pulled out the ring, the teardrop diamond that had started the bet, the joke, the lie. He dropped to one knee, right there on the plush carpet of the boardroom, in front of the stunned board members who were packing up their briefcases. "I don't need a contract this time," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't need a PR stunt. I don't need a fake wife to save my stock price." He looked up at her. "I need the voice that wakes me up. I need the woman who fights back. I need the only person in the world brave enough to sing Mozart to a room full of sharks." He held up the ring. "Ethan, Serafina, I don't care what name you use. Will you marry me? For real? No expiration date." Ethan looked down at him. She looked at the ring, then at his face. The Ice King was gone. This was just a man, asking for a chance. "I have one condition," she said, wiping her eyes. Julian blinked. "Anything. I'll buy you the Met. I'll burn this building down. Name it." "No," she said, a mischievous smile touching her lips. "You have to sing with me." Julian paled. "Ethan, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I'm tone deaf. It's a medical condition." "I'll teach you," she promised. "Every morning, in the shower, until you can hit a high C." Julian laughed, a true, deep, happy sound that had never been heard in that boardroom before. "Deal," he said. "Then yes," Ethan whispered. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Julian stood up and pulled her into a kiss that made the remaining board members awkwardly avert their eyes, though Mrs. Higgins was seen smiling as she closed her briefcase. The bet was over. The lie was dead. As they walked out of the glass cage, hand in hand, Ethan hummed the melody of the Queen of the Night. But it didn't sound like vengeance anymore. It sounded like victory. And that is how a spilled tray of champagne led to the fall of a corrupt empire and the rise of a new legend. Ethan and Julian didn't just save the company, they saved each other. Rumor has it that Julian actually took those singing lessons, though he still restricts his performances to the shower. If this story gave you chills, or if you just love seeing karma hit the bad guys, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.